Hello, please like and subscribe. Ever since I entered university, I've lived in the same area. Then, when COVID-19 broke out, the company's situation became difficult, and I was reluctantly placed in a position to manage a local factory. They paid me more than when I was in Seoul and Gyeonggi province. I have a car, and I go straight home after work on weekdays. I came down to the local factory with a happy heart, thinking that I would just think of it as dead for a few years and earn some money. The city was smaller than I thought, so after I walked around downtown for about a week, it seemed like the news that I had come down had spread. The people who had been working at the existing factory helped me adapt quickly by having gatherings and frequent company dinners, so I was really comfortable. At first, I stayed in a dormitory, but I am a tidy person, so it was difficult for me to live with others. I couldn't even fill a month and moved to a separate house for rent. Having lived in the city for a long time, it was awkward for the local people to show interest or meddling, to put it nicely or rudely. My administrative supervisor advised me to go around and greet the local residents on the day of the move. I hurried to the local rice cake shop, wrapped up some white rice cake in a hurry, divided it into plates, and when I came back after greeting them, I was exhausted. There weren't many houses where young people like me live alone, and most of them seemed to be family homes. I guess I had a prejudice against rural cities. The surrounding houses all seemed to have a lot of leisure, and the ladies who came out to receive the rice cakes looked no more than the late 40s at most. I heard later that there are many factories around, so everyone's financial situation is not bad. They all got married and settled in this city, and I heard that many of the wives came down after learning as much as they could in the city. Even then, I just had useless thoughts like, what if I have to live here for the rest of my life? How do I meet my partner? Then, a long vacation of 12 weeks was given due to the factory line renovation. The factory family said they were going somewhere for a long-awaited vacation. I stayed at home because all my friends are office workers and there was no one to meet. Even if I went up to Seoul, I watched the dramas that had piled up and played games, spending time without anything special. Sometimes when I ran out of food, I went to the mart in front of my house and ordered some of the few delivery foods. But when I wasted half of my vacation, someone rang our house bell. I didn't order delivery, and there was no one to come. So I picked up the intercom. It was a woman's voice, but since it's an old house, it didn't show her face, so I hung up and went out to open the gate. After dinner, I felt that I should return the pot. So I diligently washed the dishes and headed back to the neighbor's house. But she was alone. I hesitated to leave, but she invited me in and suggested I bring some fruit. I was wondering if that would be appropriate, but she grabbed my wrist and closed the door. We sat down and chatted about various things, and I was surprised to learn that she was much older than I had thought. She looked to be in her late 40s, but she had been in her 50s for quite some time. While I was eating fruit and thinking about how well she had maintained herself, she began to inquire about me, questions about my age, why I moved here, whether I had a girlfriend, etc. I thought she was just curious. I was also hoping that I might be introduced to someone nice. I had several interactions like this with the neighboring households. The husbands often worked in shifts at the factory, and they often stayed in the dormitory for night shifts because it was bothersome to come home. During my vacation, I had many meals at different houses, and quickly became close with them. From then on, we quickly became closer, calling each other by nicknames like older sister and brother. One day, the neighbor who first visited me invited me over for dinner. To be honest, I was happy to save on food expenses and eat delicious home-cooked meals, so I never really declined. That day, I was in a particularly good mood and the food was delicious. So I had a drink. I was worried about what would happen if her husband came in, but I was relieved to hear that he was on a night shift. As we had a few drinks, the conversation got more intense. Especially, she started talking about why she was not satisfied with her married life after marrying at a young age. Even though I'm a man, I could understand why she felt that way. I was just listening and drinking when she suddenly sat down next to me. I felt uneasy, but whether it was due to the alcohol I had consumed or the thoughts that were passing through my mind, my heart started to beat faster. I didn't think I was showing it, but she laughed and said I was cute. I laughed awkwardly, and she said she was hot and took off her outer clothes. It wasn't like she was in her underwear, but she was wearing a sleeveless dress that hinted at her silhouette. Visually, I couldn't help but keep my eyes on her, which was embarrassing. What's going on now? Is what I'm thinking about to happen? All sorts of imaginations filled my head. She must have seen my face turn red because she looked at me and kissed my cheek. Yes, as you might imagine, what happened next? I was somewhat anxious, so I went home with her and spent the night there. I was suffering from a hangover after a long time, and I couldn't see my neighbor. We were not in a relationship where we exchanged contact information, and I felt awkward going to her house first, so I just went to work that day. Days passed without any significant changes. I just went to work, came home, played games, slept, and woke up, a repetitive daily routine. In fact, within those days, I was sometimes scared that someone might find out about the relationship we had, or that the neighbor's husband might come looking for me. But none of that happened, and somewhat boring days passed by. I settled into my position as a factory manager and got very close with the people in the neighborhood. I became a bit awkward with one person, the neighbor. Feeling that this couldn't continue, I rang her doorbell again. She came out with a surprised look on her face. I asked if her husband was home, and she said no and invited me in. Sitting awkwardly in the living room, I was the first to speak. I said, "Let's be comfortable with each other as before. Let's forget everything. Let's pretend it never happened." But the response was surprising. She didn't want to just remain as the person living next door. She said she wanted to spend quality time together from time to time. At first, I said, "What if we get caught? I can't handle it." But she reassured me that it wouldn't happen. She said her husband had never been interested in domestic affairs for a long time, and he regularly changed his partners. Perhaps I didn't really hate her offer, so I said I would think about it. After a few days of thinking, I couldn't come up with an answer, and had no choice but to accept her offer. No, it felt like a fun part of my boring life in a foreign town. As we continued this lifestyle for several months, I found that human morality standards can be lowered. I even became bold, not caring much about the eyes of the neighborhood. When someone said, "You two seem close these days," I could easily pass it off by saying, "She has been good to me since I first moved in, so I depend on her a lot." Then, someone found out about our relationship. We were having a good time as usual, But the landlady who had rented us the house came to visit. It was a very hot time of the year, and I had forgotten that she was coming to check on the broken air conditioner. The structure of the house was such that the master bedroom could be seen as soon as the front door was opened, and that day, as if someone was asking to be seen, I hadn't even drawn the curtains. Seeing the scene, the landlady quickly left. Not knowing what to do, I was flustered, but soon she contacted me. She asked to contact her when I had time. I immediately called her and told her she could come to the house. The excitement was completely gone, knowing that someone had found out, and my neighbor quickly returned home. It seemed difficult to identify the problem right away, so she said she would call a technician. I thanked her and was about to send her off, but she asked to have a separate conversation. I was trembling with fear, wondering if she had noticed that I was involved with the woman next door and what she might say. I brought her into the house and waited for her to speak, but she told a very unexpected story. Actually, anyone who should know about our relationship already does. Of course, many husbands don't notice because their daily routine is to come home, eat, go to work, drink, and return home. But the neighborhood women who scrutinize everything that happens in the neighborhood are different, she said. Honestly, until now, I thought I would be severely scolded and hear harsh words. However, what she said was that she had been watching me all along. Until now, there had been no opportunity to say that. I wanted to have such a relationship, and I thought it was not possible, but seeing it today, it seemed unnecessary. This was the first time she had spoken so openly, and the first time she had imagined having such a relationship. She couldn't look me in the eye and was sweating, and honestly, I felt strange. I didn't say anything and just listened. But then she came over to me sitting on the sofa and sat on my thigh. It was a bit surprising, but on the other hand, I was wondering what was going on and was flustered, so I just did as my body told me. Almost half a year had passed, and I hadn't been able to meet a woman, and constantly repeating the same routine made me easily fall for even the smallest stimulation. It may sound like an excuse, but I really didn't intend to have a relationship. But the situation went strangely. It was also the first time in my life that I had met someone in this way and had a bed. From then on, the woman next door and the landlady became even more bold. They would sneak in and open the door while I was sleeping, or ask me who was better, as if they were competing. Every time, I didn't give a definite answer, but they even liked that. Even though I was not proactive, there was never a big complaint. In the end, it seems that most of the neighborhood women knew about my delicate relationship with the two of them. There were many days when I felt that more people were giving me subtle glances or asking me for a drink. However, I didn't want to continue this relationship any longer. The attention from the two of them was enough, and my life was no longer boring. The problem is, not long ago, the wife of the foreman I was close with called me out separately. She asked whether there was anyone in the neighborhood who didn't know about these relationships and what I was going to do about it. The atmosphere was unusual, and I had a feeling of my heart sinking, thinking she might even tell the foreman. I immediately kneeled down and asked her what she wanted me to do. If she told me to leave the factory immediately, I was ready to do so. But then, as if it's no big deal, she told me to stop by her house sometimes. While I was bewildered, she said there's nothing difficult about it, that I just need to eat something. delicious with her and spend some time. So far, there was my will in these relationships. Both the woman next door and the landlady approached me first. But not pushing them away was also a way of expressing my feelings. But the threat, not a threat, from the foreman's wife is different. It's not about whether I like it or not, but the anxiety has grown so much that I don't know whether to follow it or not. And it feels like my head is going to explode. Even if I follow her, I'm worried about what would happen if I get caught or receive a stronger threat. I'm anxious about leaving right now because I think there will be many people who would suspect or hold a grudge. Of course, I know well that my actions so far were also wrong. I am deeply repenting, and if I have to pay for it, I will. I can even go to the foreman's wife's house with my eyes closed. It's not that I dislike her as a woman, but the situation has led to this, and I'm worried. What should I do now? I thought I had been living hard in my own way, but I never dreamed that something like this would happen. I couldn't even imagine that I could be threatened to increase these strange relationships. You might think of it as a provocative story, but I need wisdom on how to cut off all relationships, how I can go back to my daily life.